we've talked about his strengths. We've talked about his early performances. If you go back to October 2018, he signed a new 6-year deal at Tottenham. So, and he come off a World Cup where he was integral. He'd scored in the quarterfinal, hadn't he, against Sweden in Russia. So was that him at his peak around that stage, or were there already issues, do you think?
I think he'd already peaked by that point. I think that contract was a bit of a compromise to increase his salary and preserve his value at Tottenham. But I think in truth, he should have, maybe he should have left Tottenham before that, because Mauricio Pochettino certainly, Mauricio is something we talked about a lot in this podcast. But before, Pochettino wanted clear outs of players at Tottenham long before they ever happened. And Dele Alli was one of the players he wanted sold. He thought that the view at Tottenham was that Dele Alli had lost a bit of his hunger before this 2018 contract signing. And they thought he was, he didn't quite have that same appetite, that same energy that he had in the past. So I think really, and I'm sure at the same point it would have suited Dele Alli to leave as well, because I'm sure that at his peak, Dele Alli would have thought, well, when am I going to go to Real Madrid? When am I going to go to Man United? So I think it might have suited. I mean, it would have been very upsetting for Tottenham fans at the time, but I think it might have suited all parties for him to be sold at that point. And really, this contract only happened because it was apparent that move wasn't going to happen, so they might as well keep his value up.
Carl?
I didn't know the finer details of why that contract was signed. In 2018, Dele Alli at that World Cup was solid. I think is probably the best way to describe that.
Yeah.
And he was beginning to lose some of that luster, and I think a lot of that was being chalked up to by injury problems. So he didn't quite have that initial first burst to get past players, and there were beginning to be tensions about his playing relationship with Harry Kane. So it looked as if Spurs were beginning to move away from a Dele and Harry Kane holding hands to lead the attack, because that was becoming slightly too predictable in league games. But I mean, 2018, the idea was Dele probably is no longer one of the best young players on the age of 25, but he's still up there. And it's the thing of give him a bit of a rest, give him a bit of a holiday, then he should come back and should be absolutely fine. But unfortunately, football doesn't necessarily always work that way.
I think the other thing that really hurt Dele at that point was the rise of Son, because when Dele was at his best, in Dele's first 2 brilliant seasons, Son was there, but Son wasn't really playing that well. Like, Son nearly left at the end of his first season, so Dele could always have the responsibility for running beyond Kane and getting into the box, whereas Son, if he was playing, would be kind of shunted out on the left in a sort of 4-2-3-1 setup. Whereas the better and better Son got, the more it became apparent that Son had to be playing, right through the middle, close to Kane. Those were kind of the spaces that Dele was in. So while, I think there's a lot, there's a lot of responsibility and blame and everything, and it's not just a case of putting it either on all on Dele or none on Dele. But I think clearly the fact that Son made himself undroppable just made it harder for Dele to play on the pitch, and ultimately this forced Dele deeper into positions where he wasn't so good, further away from goal, not really able to do his stuff quite so much.
Yeah. Tactically speaking, for all of Dele's qualities, he's not a great passer and he's not a great dribbler. He's got the invention to beat his man with a little trick move, but if you go, there's a 10-yard run with the ball, go. It's not going to be the best of all time. And I think as Tottenham, especially around like 2018, as Christian Eriksen's influence slowly declines, Tottenham stopped being a team that could sustain pressure and sustain attacks for a long period of time. This also has a lot to do with Moussa Dembele aging out the team. They become more of a counter-attack, maybe long ball football. They played what someone described as air raid football, which is Moussa Sissoko gets the ball and they have to immediately get it as far forward as quickly as possible, which meant Dele's true skills of I'm going to interpret space and make a third man run, and I can keep doing this because we're going to get 24 attacks a game, become less likely, right? Dele is a high risk, high reward player, and he used to be high in confidence and he used to do things in high volume. And then Tottenham Hotspur stopped attacking in high volume. He lost that high confidence, and then what you were left with was just high risk and not so much great reward as things progressed through 2018.
I think within your answers there are so many different reasons why you could look at why it then went wrong for Dele Alli, and therefore if you're trying to find one reason, there probably isn't one reason, is there, Jack? I mean, Carl's mentioned Spurs tactics changing because of some of the players around leaving or going into decline. He is one of, I would say, a group of Tottenham players who maybe declined with the exit of Maurizio Pochettino. There's probably some element of individual responsibility as well. And then he is not the first player to suffer at the hands of Jose Mourinho. You could probably, there are so many different reasons there that make the whole package of why it started to go very wrong.
Yeah, and as you say, he was kind of emblematic of Tottenham in the sense that his rise mirrored the rise of the Tottenham in the Pochettino era. His peak came at the same time, sort of 2016-17. They then declined together, and even at that peak, what was Dele felt like the kind of symbol of the whole team. He was the sort of talent. I mean, even if Kane was the best player, like Dele was the sort of talisman of the team because he represented all the values of the Pochettino's Tottenham. He was aggressive, he was physical, he was imaginative, he was sort of sparky. He carried himself a certain way, and that I think is really why the Tottenham fans.
He was also a bit of a tool.
He was a bit mean.
Yeah.
Pochettino Spurs bloodied the noses of bigger boys.
Yeah,
and there were bigger boys, there were richer kids, and it was Dele sort of smirk going, I'm not afraid of you. You can hit me, but I want to hit you back hard. And that's if you look at the great Pochettino victories over the biggest thing, Real Madrid, the Chelsea win, it was like, who cares? We'll rough it up.
He was so good in those big games.
I think there was the Monday Night Football where Pochettino was quite clearly angling for either the PSG or Manchester United jobs a couple of years ago. And Pochettino was speaking effusively about Dele Alli and how you sort of manage a talent who is that unique and perhaps doesn't necessarily have the most well-rounded football diet on and off the pitch and in training and whatnot. But how when we have a player that can create in that manner, you really have to sort of build around him. I've been speaking to two of my Spurs friends, Billy Mack and Will Donovan, and they say the difficult thing about Dele is because of his weaknesses in possession, in passing and dribbling, you need to put him in a team that has good players around him. You have to build around him, but also you have to put a lot of very good players around him. And it's that thing of, I'm not quite sure if a team that wants to win the Premier League or the team that wants to win the big trophies can carry a Dele Alli anymore. So then you have to look a bit lower in the table. And that's where things start getting a bit sticky.
Yeah, I definitely think that's been one of the big issues really in the last few years has been this role that Pochettino made for him was such a distinctive role, which was a perfect marriage of kind of Pochettino's style of play and of Dele's unique skill set. But then whenever it was floated that he might leave Tottenham, I could never quite figure out what role would he play in a different team? Because as we said, he's not he just isn't a midfielder. And he's not really a number 10 either. And really, if he were to go into another team, I think his best role is as a kind of second striker who can press a bit and whose main job is to get on the end of things. But that's not really a role that teams have. Like, teams just don't really play that way. And we saw this at Everton. Like, he went in and Lampard didn't really know how to use it. But I don't really blame Lampard for that because, if you're a team that's trying to stay up, you're not really going to rebuild your whole formation just to squeeze in one guy who hasn't played well for 3 years. But it's really so. And even now, to be honest, I didn't watch Besiktas against Sivasspor last night. I don't know what role Dele Alli played, but I don't know what role Dele Alli plays for a team that isn't Pochettino's Tottenham 2014 to 2019. Like, it's still a big question mark. And I think and I don't know if it will ever be solved.